kaya959.co.za to download the Kaya Biz podcast.
I'm excited to have our guest in studio with us tonight, someone who is immensely passionate about entrepreneurship. She's dedicated her life to really supporting entrepreneurs, specifically female entrepreneurs, to grow, develop, scale, and most importantly, build a level of sustainability to their operations. Having worked for various entities, blue chip JSE listed firms before, and of course running her own independent entity, Yidi. Joining us tonight is the CEO of Yidi, Jayshree Naidu. Such a pleasure to have you with us this evening, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much, Gugu. It's just so lovely to see you again after all this time.
It's been amazing. I think I've known you for almost 10 years now?
I know.
And witnessed your journey, and you've witnessed mine, so it's really refreshing. And if there's anything you've always taught me, Jayshree, about the world of entrepreneurship and the conversations that we have, is just the multiplier effect, the propeller effect, but also for many women to acknowledge that, yes, you might be running a business, but hold on, can that business run without you? And I think this takes us to the ethos of the report that you released today, the WomX Women in Business report, that gives us a lot more perspective around female entrepreneurship and the reality of it in South Africa. Let's start there. Many might say, hold on, we've got data from Stats SA, we see the banks giving us numbers, there's a number of incubators that share their thoughts too, but why was this particular report focused on women so critical for us to have a clearer picture?
And this is where the evidence-based comes in, right, with this report, because we've taken the journey of 50 businesses that we've been working with, and we've mapped their progress through the journey, and we've come up with this report that actually highlights so many key findings, including the psychological and structural barriers that women in business face.
And let's talk about those particular barriers, because we often think, hold on, the world is our oyster, we're superwomen, we're well empowered, we're educated and informed, but what are some of those psychological barriers that typically hold us back?
So, it's quite interesting that you say that, Gugu, and like you mentioned, we've known each other for a couple of years, but I do believe that women carry additional responsibilities. And we don't talk about it often. We don't talk about it in boardrooms. We don't talk about it enough in classrooms. But we've seen firsthand that there are psychological barriers to progressing from a business perspective in terms of running teams, giving out orders, dealing with masculine energy that all of us have seen, but we don't often talk about it. And yes, it's a modern world. You're a modern woman. I'm a modern woman. I was driven here by my daughter today.
I love it.
Confident driver on the road. But when you're standing around and you're at a function, there's the I that meets you, Should you be having a conversation with the men around the room? Should you be helping do something? And that transitions to the world of business. And we can't deny it.
100%. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's a lived reality that many women do struggle with, especially from a psychological point of view. Outside of that, there's also some structural barriers. And I think it's really important for us to touch on that, because that is also emphasized in the report as well. Talk us through some of those themes.
So absolutely. So we touched on 5 structural barriers, or 5 pillars that we focus on. And the first is operational capability. And this is, you mentioned it earlier as well. How do you ensure that your business runs if you are not there every single day? Because your business can't grow and scale just on your capacity to deliver. You have to implement processes and systems. The second is something that we focus on quite a bit, because we've seen this come through in every program, but especially with women-owned businesses, and I've even seen it with my mom, right? It's the financial acumen, and as well as the capability to attract funding. And how ready are you to actually attract funding? Because you ask any business, and you've had lots of conversations, what do you need?
Funding.
They'll tell you funding. But not every business is funding ready. You are not always ready to receive that funding, because you have to be given the skills on how to use that funding. And you've got to also understand that there are different types of funding and can be expensive. So The answer is not always funding. You've got to build the systems and you've got to create access to markets.
I just want to dive deeper into that one, Jayshree, because it's such an important aspect that we often speak to entrepreneurs about, because they'll say, well, I need the funding because I need more product, or I need to get more product out, or I need to ensure that I hire more people to help me render this particular service. So it almost seems as though, regardless of how we might question it, they always go back to funding. But you mentioned systems and processes, and I think that's critical that we often take for granted as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. So systems and processes, if you do it right, it frees up time. Time is a precious commodity because time allows you to attract more business. It allows you to focus on your strategy. It allows you to go after some of those deals that you don't have the time to focus on. So focusing on system and processes frees up your time. I mean, I gave a talk last week to a bunch of graduates, and it was on the impact of AI and technology. And one of the older individuals in the room said, now with technology, I have so much time. And I said, what do you do with that time? And he said, think. I think about how to grow my business. So when you spend time on systems and processes, you free up your time. So that freeing up your time for your systems and your readiness to attract funding is critical. The third pillar that we picked up was on market access and networks. And I want to touch on the female focus of this, because having clients is as important as getting funding, because your clients will generate the funding you need for your business. Accessing networks is not always easy for women in business. And I know that might come across as a controversial statement, but I've run programs and incubators, for organizations. And we've seen firsthand that some of the pitching competitions and the networking events happen after hours. And let's be realistic here. There are still women that have an accountability to their home and family. And we've seen this from the women that are on our program, where some of them even say to us, can we find ways of making my spouse understand that I am needed in the business? And how do I navigate this as a challenge? So we must not discard the challenges women face and the social impact, and as well as societal norms that are placed on being a woman and being a woman in business.
100%.
And then the fourth pillar we focused on was leadership and strategic growth, because programs focus on growing your processes and systems and giving you all of the technical skills. But you have to focus on the person that's leading the business, growing the mentality of the founder and the entrepreneur, giving them the tools that they needed. And this brings me to the last pillar, which is the basis of the white paper that we've published at WomX. It's the psychological resilience and all of the tools that you need to grow your mind.
This is important because I think that's exactly the framework we probably need to distribute to all women everywhere. Help us understand what this framework actually has in terms of the structure, but also, what tangible outcomes one can expect, because we often talk about mentorship for entrepreneurs, and I think we often don't deep dive into what exactly that looks like. So these frameworks, what do they entail?
So, as I mentioned, these are the 5 pillars that we've identified, but the framework entails taking the entrepreneur and placing them at the center of your efforts, but treating them as an individual. So using diagnostics, going deep dive into what are your personal gaps that you experience as an individual. What are the challenges you're facing, not just in terms of your technical skill sets, but psychologically, how ready are you to grow your business and to scale your business? Mapping those gaps and then creating customized programs for that particular individual in line with what their gaps are. Because we can't approach entrepreneurship development with a one-size-fits-all model.
100%.
And we can't approach women's entrepreneurship development with the same lens that we've used for every other structured program. So even the way you design a program, are you delivering it during office hours? Are you delivering it after hours? Is it after the school run? Is it before the school run? Are you giving women enough time to be totally present.
100%. And I think what you're highlighting is something so important, Jayshree. So often, perhaps even we as women have become, we've brushed it off to say, oh, well, we're all single mothers, or we're all parents, or we're all aunts and uncles, and we all have a lot on our plate and we get by. But this level of perhaps empathy is not the right word, but just a deeper understanding of the reality of female entrepreneurs takes us to another level. And many people might say, well, you run your model differently and the program to support entrepreneurs, but does it actually yield the right results? Does it build sustainability? Do you prepare and create full-time employment? Do your entrepreneurs, have record revenues? And maybe it's important for us to reflect on that this nuanced focus, to be deliberate and intentional about female entrepreneurs, producing programs and support structures that actually speak to their needs, can translate to the numbers making sense and adding up.
Absolutely. So it's nowhere compared to the billions that I heard mentioned earlier in the interviews while I was waiting. But across the program, we had a 17.8 million average revenue increase across participants, 152 jobs created amongst 50 women-owned businesses. But there's stories behind those. So, for example, we identified the top 10 businesses, and the top 3 women that were selected were not just selected based on them reaching amazing progress from a revenue perspective or jobs created. It was their intentionality on the program. How committed were they to their journey, and how intentional were they in taking some of those learnings. So the winner of the program, Cindy, she actually took every class that she was in and she transferred that learning to her staff. So she took it upon herself to equip her staff with what she was learning on the program.
The multiplier effect.
Exactly. And remember, this is about mindfulness, managing stress, and all of the other technical skills that come with any of the programs. But then, access to real mentors that can hold their hand. So, for example, the lady that came in second, Anastasia, she has a major challenge in that her logo is of 2 kids holding hands, and it was based on her children's holding the hands together, and that's how she created a logo. So this is a real story. So Anastasia has been struggling with, how do I change my brand, knowing that she wants to professionalize her brand, but now it's attached to her children and her, what she perceives as this is the core of who she is as a mum. Now, can she remove her kids to professionalize her brand because it now, she feels it might look too childish? So these are real challenges that women and women-owned businesses feel. I mean, Cindy, the winner, as I mentioned, she had a party in her village, put up a marquee to celebrate her being a winner. Her prize money was a fraction of what she makes from a turnover perspective. But she put up this marquee, had a party, so that she could tell the story to the kids in the village that if she can do it, so can they.
The multiplier effect.
Absolutely.
To close off with, Jayshree, we can go on for hours and hours, but I believe there will be men and women listening to this conversation. And even to the men, I think they're more than welcome to participate and share some perspective and even learn from leaders like yourself. I'm assuming they can visit the WomX website, womx.co.za, WOMX.co.za. But for anyone who needs guidance, who's uncertain, who wants to enter or is looking for support, just an entrepreneur who is uncertain where to start, what does this platform provide them with?
So the WomX website has access to a free entrepreneurship academy. We have inspirational content every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In fact, every Friday we give you an AI tip on how to run your business. There's free resources. There's access to some of our blogs in terms of how to grow your business. And, the new program will be open for applications in the next month or so. And women in business are welcome to apply. But if you just follow us, you can find access to free content to grow your business. It's not just for women in business. Anyone can access the content, and we want individuals to just use it to grow themselves and their journeys.
100%. Jayshree, always a pleasure speaking to you, ma'am. We could speak to you for hours on end because I think your level of expertise and the experience you've had on the ground literally changing the lives of entrepreneurs. Oh man, it's exactly what we need. And there's so many lessons and insights that we need to impart on so many more entrepreneurs too. Such a pleasure having you in studio tonight.
Thank you, Gugu. Thank you for having me. It was lovely seeing you again.
Likewise. Jayshree Naidu, phenomenal business leader and entrepreneur who is talked to us tonight about the release of the WomX Women in Business report, giving us a lot more perspective around the challenges, opportunities, but also the pillars that are required to make sure that women-owned businesses can really scale. Truly scale, like really scale. I hope you understand how deep I mean it. So giving us some perspective there tonight, visit their website, womx.co.za.
Click kaya959.co.za to download the Kaya Biz podcast.